And if you don't have a lot of your ducks in a row on the paperwork, like knowing their tax identification number, things start to get held up. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast. And today, it's just Aaron and I. We're back, just the two of us.
We're going to rock it.
This is when we like to talk about things we like to pretend we know a lot about. I mean, we deal with this a lot, which is shipping to Mexico. There's a lot of challenges shipping to Mexico. So we do have a country guide on shipping to Mexico. So if you go to our docs.zonos.com. Actually, I think it's zonos.com/docs. Go to guides. You can see a country guide that might help summarize a few things. But I know we're going to have a few extra nuggets in here of learnings because you've been doing some research. Yeah. I'm excited to moderate and just ask some questions. So let's get started. Aaron, tell us a little bit about the market, the opportunity, and then I'm sure we're going to get into the challenges and all of that. So
So to start with,
have you been to Mexico?
I have been.
Okay.
I've been a couple different times. In fact, I could, when I think of the Mexican market, I think of like my memories as a kid riding a bus across the border to go to Tijuana to buy a bunch of stuff on the street, right? And then you're just haggling with cash and price on counterfeit goods. And I mean, I think that's kind of a stigma that's out there for Mexico. I had the same thing on my honeymoon. We stopped in Cozumel on part of our cruise. And I remember trading the backpack I had for like some art that some guy was making on it. I mean, that's just my experience with, dealing with Mexico.
Yep.
But the reality of it is, this is an economy that's really taking off. So we're talking it's a $1.3 trillion market. It's the second largest economy in Latin America next to Brazil, 14th largest in the world. And there's, it's rapidly coming online. It's a little behind more developed countries like America and things as far as the online presence, but it's booming. Payment methods are rapidly moving to electronic. It's historically been cash-based, but now a lot of people are moving to credit cards and other types of electronic payments, which is facilitating really massive growth in online e-commerce. So this is a market that maybe historically has been small for some merchants, but it's becoming more and more relevant every year. I think the last numbers I saw was they're expecting it to have double-digit growth, 11+% growth every year, even moving forward. So overall, it is a good market. It does come with some strings attached. It's not the easiest market to get into, and we can talk a little bit about that. But no, overall, it's a pretty valid market. So, but before we dive into Mexico, Clint, let me tell you a little story from the weekend. So, took a road trip with some of my kids to go for my dad's birthday. And while I'm driving along the road, there's a hill next to the road, and coming down the hill is this big wheel of cheese that just starts rolling down the hill. And I was like, holy cow. Like, I forgot to bring something to dinner for my dad's birthday party. So I went and grabbed this wheel of cheese, threw it in the back of our car, and took it up, and everybody's happy to have the extra cheese there and I didn't come in empty-handed, so that was good. But they all started asking me, what kind of cheese is it? I'm like, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it's nacho cheese. And they said, really? How do you know it's nacho cheese? Well, when I was loading it in the car and started driving away, a Mexican was running behind me saying, that's nacho cheese, that's nacho cheese.
Okay. That's great. I love nachos. Love nacho cheese jokes.
Absolutely.
That was great. Okay, so now I have a question for you about Mexico that I wonder if you know. You said it was the 14th largest economy.
Uh-huh.
If you look at the accounts that we work with, where does Mexico rank in the distribution of top
I don't know.
top
I was
sales?
going to ask you this. I didn't look this up.
Okay, so you could guess. Right? We know it's hard to ship there.
Can I guess 14th?
You sure? If that's what you want to guess.
Well, there's a fair number of U.S. merchants though, right? So maybe it's higher than 14th. Is it better than 14th?
What's your guess?
guessing 9th.
Oh, man, I should. Yeah, it's 8th. It was a really good guess.
Yes.
8th on the list. Canada, Australia, Great Britain, Germany, France, Switzerland, the UAE, and then Mexico. Singapore, New Zealand come after that.
It's a top 10.
It's a top 10. It's a top 10 destination. And in the top 10, pain in the butts. Okay, shipping there, right?
Let's do it. Let's talk. Okay. So in the Mexican market, as far as the online purchases go, Amazon has a presence there. Even Walmart, Mercado Libre is another. That's a big Latin based marketplace. But then people are going to shop online and buy from a number of places too. So let's say you're trying to get in there. You can go the marketplace route if you want. There's actually a lot of strings attached in trying to get in there.
So
You've tried that.
So I tried it, yeah, because we have an online store, and I was really excited about trying out Mercado Libre, and the issue that I had was being a U.S. retailer, I had to get Actually, there were a couple issues. One, I had to use their shipping service, so I couldn't ship on my own account. It had to go through Mercado Libre, and then there was a bank account issue with receiving the funds, something like that. All I remember is, in the end, it didn't work for me. And I feel like I can figure that kind of stuff out, and I'm like, this is too hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so
in fact, I think you get that a lot with these marketplaces. They either like to fulfill from within Mexico, and if the Mexican market is a big market for you, it's probably worth the effort to go through that hassle if you're going to get a big return on it. That's not the case for a lot of retailers, but if you do decide that you want to go down that path, to be the importer of record, you have to have an actual Mexican entity. Now, you can't have like a foreign entity, like let's say you're getting an NRI into Canada.
Which stands for non-resident importer. So you could be a non-resident and be the importer. That's not an option in Mexico.
No, you have to be a full-blown, you've got to go in, start a business in Mexico and go through all the red tape and bureaucracy.
Why would I want to do that anyways?
If you think that you need to get your product closer to the consumers and, make shipping a little faster.
You're saying if I want to fulfill from inside the country, is there a benefit to being the importer of record if you're shipping and fulfilling from the U.S.?
You get to deal with some of the red tape. I guess.
I think that's where
customers
you can have your own broker now, right? But does that now move it to a high value shipment, which I know we're going to talk about all that kind of stuff too, right?
If you're doing
a break bulk, type shipment, but
so most of it's moving big shipments in to warehouse there. But if you want to do that, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of labeling requirements and other regulations that you may have to deal with depending on your goods.
So you have to be really sure you want to be doing this.
Bureaucracy is a pretty big thing in Latin America and in Mexico. So you're going to have a lot of red tape. It's going to take a while to get through this hassle. You're going to have to hire third-party accounting firms and other things to help you deal with all your taxes down there. It will be a big lift to make that all work. And so if you're just trying to dip a toe, it's not going to be worth it, right? And even if you're not, even if you've got the type of goods and type of shipments that you can just sell cross-border from, say, the U.S. or somewhere else and have good transit times, you may never want to deal with that, even if you have a lot of volume.
So probably the majority of the people listening to this podcast, I would imagine, are not ready yet to deal with that amount of bureaucracy. So what are my options now? Because I don't want to be the importer of record.
Nope. So the best option, send B2C. So this is personal shipments to your customers in Mexico, and they will be the importer of record. And so the nice thing about that is, for personal shipments, they do have some simplified clearance processes, and there's still some red tape and things you have to be aware of, and we'll talk high level at it here. But that's where you can kind of just ship it, and your customer, it'll be cleared under your customer's name, and as long as it checks the right boxes, it'll clear and deliver them just fine, and you can collect that duty and tax up front and have your carrier bill it back to you. And so still create the experience as if it's domestic without having to go through all the hassle.
And maybe you'll get to this later, but why do things get held up so often? Like, why does it seem to be the country that has? Because you just made it sound like that was simple, maybe a little too more simple than what happens in reality. Because, we've had the question from customers: who's the best carrier to ship to Mexico? And we deal with one of the largest shippers to Mexico, with probably DHL in the world, in the US, right, for B2C, ships a lot to Mexico. We asked them this, and they said DHL. But I think a lot of that's because they do a lot of DHL. I mean, they do have some experience with the other carriers, but why is it so hard?
Bureaucracy, and then they've got a lot of
like, what's an example then of what happens a lot? Like,
so
things get held up, and especially if it's a Chinese made good from history anyway, like with shoes and things like that. So like the commodity, like there's just, is it these kind of things that just cause?
Yeah, like
there's just so many rules and like.
Yes. Yeah. So we've got a customer that sells a lot of high value apparel. That's going to be a problem.
What do you consider high value?
Like over $1,000.
Okay.
Right. And by the way, a lot of the things we're going to talk through on de minimis and landed costs and stuff, things are based USD many of the times.
Yeah. So we're talking USD numbers.
So the high value goods, or even they have things like, hey, if you're buying more than 3 pairs of shoes or 3 articles of clothing, suddenly it triggers a whole bunch of other paperwork, and they're going to start reaching out to the consignee, who's your customer, and starting to ask for tax ID type information, personal information, and triggers a whole bunch of extra paperwork that can turn problematic.
Is there a specific ID they ask for? From kind of like Brazil, they have the CPF number. In Mexico,
yes,
are they asking for some type of identification? Because this is usually when I think this is where clearance processes get difficult, is you go from one country that you can easily ship DDP, meaning duties and taxes paid and returned to you. You know, the duties and taxes come back to you, it just clears and gets delivered. But they have countries like Brazil, and if you don't have a lot of your ducks in a row on the paperwork, like knowing their tax identification number or the CPF number in Brazil, things start to get held up. So what in Mexico is, you mentioned there's going to be a lot of quantities. That's going to cause an issue. If it's high value, that might cause an issue. Made in China, or anywhere where there's probably a countervailing duty or something like that, high scrutiny.
Yeah, they have a number called like an RFC number.
Okay.
Even if it's going to, let's say, an expat that's American down there, they might be asking for their social security number or some sort of identification. But the real problematic things will be there. Like right now, there's some recent stuff where they're cracking down on Chinese shipments. I think that's kind of a theme that we're seeing around the globe, is these really dirt cheap, low value Chinese shipments. And some of the things that are going to cause problems and trigger issues at the border as well is very vague descriptions like gift or sample or a zero value on an item, or anything where it's not super clear on how to get, what the goods are, you're going to have problems.
Where the Chinese things make sense, and it feels like it's always had additional scrutiny, and I think it's probably higher lately. But that's a competing, manufacturing market to China, right? They want to. Mexico wants to make the shoes themselves, so they want to have the manufacturing there, and so it's their way of, protecting their industry.
Absolutely,
using tariffs.
Absolutely. Yep,
and regulation.
So there's a lot of things that just to be aware of, and Mexico will even actually try to limit the number of imports an individual makes, say in a given month.
How do they track that?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, and it's really hard for you as a retailer to know exactly if someone's a high volume importer. But at the same time, if that consumer is importing a lot of goods, they know how to get through, all the paperwork and bureaucracy that's there. So they're probably the more seasoned veterans when it comes to buying goods online from somewhere else. But yeah, it's usually about 10 shipments or $2,500 worth of stuff a month is where kind of starts triggering some problems. But how they monitor it and enforce it, I don't know.
What about like food or anything that you're consuming, right? Either skin or food or supplements. Is there issues with that?
Yep. That's another area where it could start triggering.
More so than other countries is what you're saying.
Yes.
Like even more than Canada, because Canada's kind of strict too.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So here's an example. Have a friend this is a personal shipment. This wasn't even like a business sell or anything. Just trying to ship some goods to his son that happened to be in Mexico at the time. And he tried multiple times sending, and it just had some snacks and stuff in there. And it kept getting stuck and not getting through customs. Now his final solution was to send it through the postal network. So that's something that's
You think it's easier to ship something like that? You know, you want tracking and delivery, and you send it UPS, FedEx, or DHL. A personal shipment, sending it with those carriers is like
And the postal stuff just kind of flew right through under the radar. I mean, that's the reality of what happens in the postal network. Something to be aware of. But yeah, the quality of service of these express carriers is really good. But sometimes if you've got to be careful about making sure you fill out everything right and know exactly what you're shipping if you're going to have problems with it.
Okay, so I jumped right to the problems. Now let's talk about like how it works. Like, what is the de minimis? You know, how much is there some, what you said simplified. I'd like to, it sounds like a simplified tax system, but not a simplified clearance system.
Correct.
So
Correct. And here's the thing. We have a lot of customers that ship to Mexico without that many problems. Right. But it seems like when there are, in fact, most of them ship globally without a lot of problems. When you're doing low value personal shipments, you can typically do it, fairly easily. Mexico is the one that just kind of pops up as kind of a problematic country, but really most of our customers are doing okay there. So the tax rate there is 16%, but anything under
how's that calculated? Is it
CIF? So it's going to be on the product and the shipping cost.
Okay.
And then the tax de minimis is $50, and also the duty de minimis. So
what kind of 50 Mexican pesos?
50 US dollars.
Okay, US dollars. All right, so that's actually a fairly high compared to Canada, which is 20 or 40 CAD, I guess, depending.
Yep. So this is going to be under 50 USDs going in duty and tax free. Now it gets a little interesting between 50 and 1,000. So because we're going to throw in some trade agreement stuff here with the USMCA, which kind of gets some special rules for US and Canada origin goods between 50 USD and 117 US dollars. How they picked 117, I have no idea.
Okay, so there's some special treatment if the good is made in the United States.
I believe it's just shipping from.
It's just the origin from the ship from between 50 USD and 117. And
this is just the value of the goods, by the way.
Just values of the goods. And they're using USD values, but they picked 117 as the number.
Yeah, I don't know where that number comes from. Maybe it's for good luck
or
something.
All right, so if it's for good luck, then how good of luck am I going to have if I'm shipping something between 50 and 117?
Okay, so what they do is they do like a blended rate. That's
a tax rate or duty rate?
Yes. They will call it a tax. It'll show up on the duty and tax bill as a tax, but it's it effectively takes into account, it's like it's covering both tax and duty. So it's almost like you take an average duty rate and just kind of blend it, throw it in. But it actually makes it so instead of the tax rate of 16%, now it's just 17%. So it's an extra percent. And it's going to cover both duty and tax. That's all you're going to get charged.
All right.
That. Between 50 and 117. Now, but that's only if it's coming from the US or Canada. If it's coming from anywhere else in the world, it's 19%.
But it's blended still and simplified.
Yep. Now, up to $1,000, between $117 and $1,000, it's 19% no matter what. So really, the only
wait. So if you're outside of the United States shipping there, it doesn't matter. From 50 to 1,000, it's going to be 19%.
Correct.
For personal shipments. Does it matter the quantity?
No.
The country of origin, though?
No.
Really? Huh.
No. The only concession is the $50 to $117 US and Canada shipments get a concession of 2%. So it's only 17 in that value range. And And then once you get over 1,000, you start getting into more regular clearance and duty calculations.
Okay. Now I want to go look at, the complaints on the shipments into. So do you think the shipments to Mexico, typically the issues are occurring when they're over 1,000 USD?
Yeah. Or if you've got,
or maybe a highly regulated item that doesn't. I mean, they've got to have stuff like the tobacco, alcohol, kind of, except exemptions. And do you think there's more items that fall under that? Maybe. Yes. I mean, okay,
yeah. So I think for example, I pull up one of the carriers list and it starts going through a whole bunch of different things. There's all sorts of Mexican authorities that get involved in different things. Like if you're selling fragrances and colognes, there's going to be more of a formal import process. So there's just different types of shipments that are going to trigger more formal import clearance processes than say you get in other countries. And so that's why things get held up in customs, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, this one now just triggered a different process. Now I got to get different paperwork involved. I got to start reaching out and gathering information. Next thing you know, the thing's stuck in customs and it feels like it never gets out. So my advice, and this is where I'm not going into a deep dive on this today with all of it, but the advice I have is work with a reputable carrier to go to Mexico, one that you feel comfortable going there, and work with them and say, okay, here's my goods.
Yeah.
What do I need to do? And some of them will actually have a whole registration process to do a bunch of pre-work to get you set up so that way your goods clear.
So maybe when you say work with them, maybe you're talking to your sales rep and say, can we have a call with the broker there? Or because the sales reps,
have the sales rep tell you who they need to get in touch with.
Find me the person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So reputable carrier, obviously the three, UPS, FedEx, DHL, all ship into Mexico, and definitely should be able to help you if you're having issues. Absolutely. As long as you get them on the phone and talk to the right people. What about the consolidators? And I mean, we already talked about the posts. They're not yet. There isn't a DDP option for USPS or posts into Mexico. I mean, that's what we're helping build out with the UPU and with the United States Postal Service. But what about consolidators like
like DHL Ecommerce is
one.
Right. They go there. Landmark and a bunch of others go there. There are some that don't touch it. I can't think of an example off the top of my head of ones that don't go there right now. I just know there are some. I didn't take a deep dive into that before this. But you just talk to them. If you're using a consolidator, just ask them.
Yeah.
They're going to be pretty honest with you. If they kind of cringe and be like, Mexico's not our strong suit, then okay, maybe you need to come up with a different solution. But they're usually pretty candid. They don't want to set expectations too high if that's not a strong market for them. So, but yeah, I just work very closely with them. They help them know your products, and they'll be able to tell you, yeah, we're confident we can clear, or no, you may have some problems with these items, so you could either exclude them, or they might have a process you could go through to get things set up to where your products are going to clear better.
Okay, so if I was to summarize today a little bit, one, be very aware of your average order value going into Mexico, and not just average, but how often you go over 1,000, because that's going to maybe trigger a little more difficulty. To be very, pull in the carrier, make sure you're working with your carrier to simplify things, and be aware of the roadblocks just with regulation, like with things you were talking about with quantities. Not just the values, but the country of origin, where it's shipping from. All of that can have an impact. Is there anything else that recommendations you'd have for someone wanting to?
I think just to
sell into Mexico,
just work with whoever's moving your packages and clearing your packages. Just consult with them, and you guys work together as a team and a partnership to set your products up for success, because you want to make sure the experience is good for your customers when selling cross-border into Mexico, and they want it to be a good experience too. They don't like things getting hung up in customs any more than you do. So just being transparent and upfront with them and collaborating with them on how to get your products to be able to ship freely into Mexico is the best thing you can do.
All right. Well, Aaron, thanks for today. I think that was a great, I learned a lot about Mexico. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Clint.